At the heart of INFJ's perfectionism is a desire for internal coherence and alignment with their values. They tend to hold themselves to exceptionally high standards because their vision of the ideal, whether it's a moral principle, a personal goal, or a creative endeavor, is vivid and emotionally resonant. Unlike perfectionism that stems from competitiveness or a need for external validation, INFJ perfectionism is often quiet and internalized. They are driven by a deep sense of responsibility to live authentically and contribute meaningfully to the world. Their intuition constructs a picture of what should be, and they are often haunted by the gap between that vision and current reality. This internal compass can make them meticulous and exacting when working on personal projects or helping others. They tend to be extremely thorough, analyzing details repeatedly to ensure that every element fits within the larger picture they have envisioned. This may manifest as painstaking attention to phrasing when writing, striving for emotional nuance in creative work, or reworking plans or ideas until they feel right. That feeling of rightness is an intuitive knowing, something difficult to articulate but profoundly compelling to the INFJ. However, this perfectionism can come at a cost. INFJs often struggle with procrastination, not out of laziness, but because the weight of their ideals can be paralyzing. They may delay starting or finishing projects because the outcome might not meet the high standard they've set in their mind. This can lead to cycles of self-doubt and frustration, especially when their inner vision clashes with the limitations of time, energy, or resources. They may find it difficult to delegate tasks, believing no one else will approach the work with the same level of care or alignment with their values. Their perfectionism is also tied to a strong sense of purpose. INFJs want their lives to mean something, and they often search for a vocation or calling that resonates with their internal ideals. This can make them highly driven, but also prone to existential anxiety if they feel off track or unfulfilled. They may question their path repeatedly, always searching for the most authentic expression of their values. Because of this, they may spend a long time researching, planning, or refining before making decisions, especially those that affect their long-term trajectory. Despite these challenges, INFJ perfectionism can also be a source of deep creativity, compassion, and transformation. Their idealism pushes them to imagine better futures, not only for themselves but for others. They are often visionaries, counselors, and quiet leaders, capable of inspiring change through subtle but powerful influence. Their perfectionism, when balanced, becomes a drive toward excellence, integrity, and deep connection. This need for alignment goes into their creative expression. INFJs are often drawn to art, writing, psychology, social activism, or spiritual work, fields where the abstract can become concrete and meaning can be transmitted. However, their perfectionism can be stifling in these areas, especially when their vision is far more refined than their ability to execute it, which is common early in a creative or professional journey. They may abandon projects that aren't measuring up to their inner standards, or they may endlessly revise, rework, or hide their efforts, feeling they are never quite ready to be shared with the world. Perfectionism can also affect how INFJs handle failure or criticism. While they may appear composed, criticism often cuts deeply because it threatens their internal harmony and questions their integrity or competence. Even constructive feedback can feel destabilizing if it implies they are falling short of their inner ideal. This doesn't mean they're unwilling to grow. On the contrary, INFJs are often relentless in their self-improvement. But growth must be integrated carefully, at a pace that aligns with their internal processing. They may ruminate over mistakes for days, not because they can't forgive themselves, but because they are deeply invested in understanding what went wrong, what it says about them, and how to evolve as a result. This tendency also makes INFJs vulnerable to burnout. They often push themselves to achieve not for recognition, but because they're trying to fulfill a deeply personal mission. They may say yes to too many obligations, take on too much responsibility, or stay silent about their own needs, all in the name of being good, helpful, or necessary. When they break under this pressure, it often happens privately. INFJs tend to retreat inward when overwhelmed, disappearing from others rather than revealing vulnerability, because admitting imperfection can feel like exposing a sacred part of themselves they've tried so hard to protect. With maturity and self-awareness, many INFJs begin to loosen their perfectionism by embracing the idea that imperfection can still be beautiful, meaningful, and aligned with purpose. They learn to see life as a journey rather than a project to be perfected. They begin to trust that their value lies not in flawless execution, but in the depth, intention, and authenticity they bring to everything they do. This often involves learning to work with their intuition in a more grounded way, using it not just to envision ideals, but to guide realistic steps toward those ideals, even if the path is winding and imperfect. INFJ perfectionism is not a flaw, but a reflection of their deep longing for integrity, meaning, and transformation. It's a powerful force that, when balanced, can fuel extraordinary contributions to the world. But it must be tempered with self-compassion, flexibility, and the understanding that some of the most beautiful parts of life emerge not in the flawless execution of a plan, but in the unexpected grace of the imperfect. At the root of their perfectionism lies the INFJ's visionary quality. Their dominant function, introverted intuition, constantly processes abstract patterns and long-term implications. This means that INFJs don't just see a project or relationship in its current state. They see what it could become. They are always projecting forward, imagining the fully realized potential of everything they care about. That vision is often idealized, elevated to a place of near spiritual importance. When reality fails to live up to that vision, as it often does, it can feel like a betrayal, not just of their hopes, but of their very sense of meaning. This high sensitivity to the disconnect between reality and potential leads INFJs to become deeply self-critical. They might replay conversations in their heads over and over, wondering if they said the right thing, if they should have phrased something differently, or if they were truly understood. Even in situations where others have long moved on, the INFJ may still be revisiting the moment, mentally editing and perfecting it in retrospect. This perfectionism in social interactions is tightly linked to their auxiliary function, extrovert feeling, which seeks harmony and connection. When they feel they've failed to uphold those ideals, it doesn't just cause discomfort, it can cause emotional pain and shame. Because of this, INFJs often internalize mistakes more deeply than they appear to. They may outwardly seem calm, composed, and even forgiving, but inwardly they may be punishing themselves for not living up to the standards they've internalized. These standards are often invisible to others but rigid and absolute to the INFJ. For instance, they might believe that being kind means always being patient, or that creating meaningful work means never settling for mediocrity, even when those ideals are impossible to maintain at all times. Their inner perfectionist doesn't make room for inconsistency, and that rigidity can be emotionally taxing. Another aspect of INFJ perfectionism comes through in their work and purpose. INFJs typically crave meaning in their careers and creative pursuits. They often feel out of place in environments that prioritize efficiency over authenticity or profit over ethics. Their perfectionism demands that their output not only be high quality, but also reflect their core values. If they feel pressured to compromise their integrity by cutting corners, promoting something they don't believe in, or working for a cause they don't fully support, it can cause deep internal conflict. They might stay up late reworking a project that no one else thought needed fixing, not for praise, but because they can't rest until it reflects what they believe to be true and good. INFJ perfectionism can also be marked by extremes. On the surface, they might appear highly adaptable, but when it comes to the areas that matter most to them, they often exhibit all-or-nothing thinking. If they can't do something right, they may not want to do it at all. If a relationship doesn't feel deeply authentic, they may withdraw completely. If they can't find a career that feels meaningful, they may float in a liminal space, refusing to settle even if it means uncertainty or financial instability. This black and white thinking is a defense mechanism, an attempt to protect their ideals from being diluted or corrupted by compromise. Despite this intensity, INFJs often hide the depth of their perfectionism from others. They tend to present as calm, warm, and collected, not because they are unaffected, but because they feel a responsibility not to burden others with their inner chaos. Their perfectionism includes emotional self-management. They feel they must be composed, thoughtful, and empathetic at all times, even when they're struggling internally. This can create a dissonance between how they feel and how they are perceived, deepening their sense of isolation and making it harder for them to ask for help. But perfectionism, for the INFJ, is not necessarily destructive. When balanced with self-awareness and self-compassion, it becomes a guiding force for excellence, integrity, and service. The same sensitivity that drives their perfectionism also allows them to see what others miss, to create beauty and insight where others see confusion, and to offer profound emotional support to those who need it. Their perfectionism can be channeled into powerful, meaningful work, writing that touches the soul, advocacy that changes lives, or mentorship that gently transforms others. The INFJ's perfectionism is often interwoven with a deep existential longing, a desire not only to do things well, but to do things right in the deepest, most soulful sense of the word. Unlike perfectionism that stems from a need to compete or impress, the INFJ's perfectionism is tied to their core identity. It's about living in a way that aligns with an internal vision of truth, beauty, and justice that they can't ignore, even if they try. And often, they do try to ignore it, because this level of internal pressure can be overwhelming. But INFJs rarely succeed in shutting it off, because their inner ideals are not passing preferences or superficial goals. They are sacred. This sacredness of vision often creates an invisible tension. INFJs can live for long stretches of time appearing externally composed and functional, while internally feeling restless, dissatisfied, or even despairing that nothing quite lives up to the meaning they long for. Their lives are often marked by this emotional dissonance, an outer calm masking a storm of internal evaluation. Even when others praise them, INFJs may feel conflicted because they see all the ways they fell short of their own expectations, ways that may be completely invisible to anyone else. Perfectionism also plays a significant role in the INFJ's identity development. Because INFJs are highly introspective and reflective, they spend a lot of time constructing an internal understanding of who they are and who they are meant to be. This self-concept is rich, layered, and often idealized. They want to be wise, kind, purposeful, creative, insightful, and ethical. Anything that contradicts or undermines this internal identity can cause distress. If they behave in a way that feels out of alignment with their ideals, snapping at someone in anger, failing to meet a personal or professional commitment, being misunderstood, they often ruminate over it for days, not because they care about image, but because they fear they are not living up to their essence. This pursuit of self-perfection also plays into the INFJ's deep fear of being too much or not enough, a dual fear that often originates early in life, when their sensitivities and insights may have been misunderstood, dismissed, or seen as strange. As children and adolescents, many INFJs learn to adapt by becoming what others need them to be. They become good listeners, caretakers, achievers, peacemakers. But beneath that social adaptability is often a gnawing feeling that they're wearing a mask, or that their real self remains hidden. Their perfectionism becomes not only a way to live up to their own ideals, but also a way to avoid rejection. If they can just do everything right, maybe they will finally be understood and accepted for who they really are. This is perhaps one of the saddest aspects of the INFJ's perfectionism, the way it can become a cage. The more they strive to meet an ideal, the harder it becomes to relax, to show vulnerability, to accept imperfection in themselves and others. Even joy can be filtered through a critical lens. Am I appreciating this moment enough? Should I be doing something more meaningful? Is this happiness real, or just temporary? Their ability to see deeply into things can turn inward and become a kind of relentless questioning. They long to be at peace, but their perfectionism often tells them they must earn peace through service, insight, or moral correctness. Relationships, too, are often affected by INFJ perfectionism in subtle but significant ways. Because they are so attuned to others' emotions and needs, INFJs often enter relationships with the unspoken belief that they are responsible for maintaining harmony and emotional depth. They want relationships that are not just functional, but transformational. They want to understand and be understood in the deepest possible way. And yet, because they are so hard on themselves, they may unconsciously hold others to the same standard, hoping, even expecting, that others will show the same level of insight, care, and introspection. When this doesn't happen, INFJs may withdraw, quietly grieving the loss of an ideal that was never fully formed but deeply felt. They may also overextend themselves emotionally in relationships, giving far more than they receive, driven by the belief that love must be selfless, patient, and unconditional. This self-imposed idealism often leads them to ignore their own needs and boundaries, and when they burn out or feel unappreciated, they may blame themselves for not being strong or perfect enough to maintain the emotional balance. They can struggle to ask for what they need, not because they don't know, but because asking feels like a failure of self-sufficiency, of being too much or needy. Healing from INFJ perfectionism isn't about abandoning ideals. It's about realizing that ideals are meant to guide, not punish. INFJs don't need to let go of their vision for a better world, a deeper relationship, or a more authentic self, but they do need to make peace with the messiness of the human experience. They have to learn that their worth is not conditional on what they produce, how much they give, or how perfectly they live up to a set of inner standards. Worth, for the INFJ, must eventually be found in their being, not just their doing. This healing often begins with allowing themselves to be seen in their imperfections, to speak when they're unsure, to create when the work is unfinished, to love when they feel afraid, to rest when they haven't earned it. Slowly, through these acts of gentle rebellion against the tyranny of perfection, they begin to find something more powerful than flawlessness, freedom. And in that freedom, they rediscover the quiet, powerful beauty of simply being human.